tell you, everything is going great in my life. I have no trials. I have no temptations. Nothing is attacking me. Everything's going great. And the professor just began to shake his head. He says, that's not good. He says, well, why not? He says, well, if Satan's not attacking you, he already has you. So don't be surprised when trials come our way. Be surprised when trials don't. Then maybe we need to reevaluate our life. So we need to expect suffering, but we also need to rejoice in the suffering. 3 times he tells us that we are to rejoice. He uses different words at times, but 3 times he tells us that we are to rejoice. He says, don't be surprised, but rejoice insofar as you share in Christ's suffering. Why should we rejoice? Because we get to share in his suffering. Most of us would want to believe that Christ has suffered for us. So since Christ has suffered for us, we don't have to face anything. But scriptures teach us that we are going to share in that same suffering that he did. As I said, this was a hard teaching, so he begins out, beloved, and I said that he never taught them anything that he didn't apply in his own life. When we go back to Acts chapter 5, we see in Acts chapter 5 that the Jews, they are beginning to get jealous of the apostles' teachings. So what they end up doing is they end up arresting them, putting them in a public prison. An angel comes, lets them out, tells them to go and begin to preach again. They come and get them again and bring them before the council, probably the same council that crucified Christ. They brought him before the council and they said, we strictly charged you not to teach in this name. Oh, we told you you can't teach in the name of Jesus. And I love what they said. They said, we must obey God rather than man. We must obey God rather than man. So this is when Gamaliel makes this big speech of, if this is from God, you're just going to find yourself fighting against God. So just let this die out. But before they let him go, they beat him. So they were imprisoned. They were beaten. And in verse 41 it says that then they left the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for the name. When the fiery trials come your way, is that how you leave? Rejoicing that you was counted worthy to suffer, to have dishonor in his name. Because I'll tell you, I struggle with that. Because when I leave the suffering, I'm not rejoicing. I'm asking, why? I'm surprised. So he tells us to rejoice so that we're sharing in the suffering of Christ. But he also says that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. Imagine when Christ returns and the whole world sees Jesus in all of his glory. Are we ever going to say, man, I still wish I didn't go through that? Or are we going to look at him and say, I am so thankful I was able to go through that for you? We're going to be glad. Because when we know when he comes back in all of his glory and every knee will bow and every tongue confess, we know when he looks at us, we will see love, not condemnation. We can rejoice when he comes in his glory because we know whose side we're on. He goes on, he says, but if you're insulted for the name of Christ, you're blessed. Blessed means happy, to be fortunate, to be congratulated. You are happy, you are fortunate because the Spirit of God, or of glory and of God, rest upon you. We see that phrase once before in Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah chapter 11 is one of the prophecies of the coming Messiah. We see in verse 1, it says, "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of God." The same Spirit that descended down on the day of Jesus' baptism to rest upon him, to fulfill this passage in Isaiah 11, verse 2, is the same Spirit that rests upon us in the midst of our suffering. It's amazing. And yes, we should be blessed. We should be happy. We should be congratulated, knowing that that same Spirit is the one that rests upon us. But he goes on and he says, "But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or a meddler." I don't know about you, but I found that list kind of funny. I think all of us would agree, yeah, a Christian should not be a murderer. Yeah, a Christian should not be a thief. They shouldn't be an evildoer, but a meddler? Come on, that's half of us. Why would meddler be in the same list as a murderer, a thief, and an evildoer? Why? The word meddler here, it is a very unique word. It's actually only used one time in the entire New Testament, and it's this passage. So scholars has had trouble trying to define what the word is, because oftentimes for us to try to define a word, we will just look at different places, either in the book or the chapter or the New Testament or even the entire Bible, to find out where is this other word used so we know what it means. But when it's only used once, how do we know? But what they've come to find out as they do study of looking at other Greco-Roman writings, it's kind of a compound word. And when you add it together, what it basically means, the definition is one who looks carefully on others' affairs. So you look carefully on other people's affairs that you have no business being involved in. Why would that still be added to a list with a murderer? There's two possible reasons why Peter added it here. First of all, it could be that he's seen this going on within the church. He's seen that the churches that he was writing to, they had a lot of meddlers within it, so he wanted to make for sure that he shot that down. Because we have all seen what happens when that's within the church. We start to break up in our own cliques. We're not a family anymore. This group don't like this. This group don't like this. This one doesn't care for this one. So what happens? We split. We begin to die. And when an outside world sees a church split and sees everything that they're going on and seeing all of the conflict, and they look at their life and they say, I've got enough stress, I've got enough worry, I've got enough stuff going on in my own life. Why would I want to be a part of a family that's just going to add more to it? Don't we want to be added to a family that's going to help us through our issues and not add on to our issues? It kills churches. It is, in essence, a murderer. So that could be one reason. Others have thought that the reason that it's added to this list is because in Greco-Roman society, people like meddlers, they were so disdained, they were so hated, that if they was a Christian and a meddler, that would give a horrible outside witness to the world. And our job as a church is to reach out to the lost and the dying. So if we're becoming what they hate as a meddler, not something that's good, they can hate us because of our Christian beliefs and our righteousness. That's fine. But when it's something that even God stands against, there's a problem. I think it's both. I think it kills churches, and I think it's a horrible witness to the outside world. And that's why he added it to a list of murderers, thieves, and evildoers. Because it runs rampant in our churches today. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in his name. If we are to have to suffer for his name, let's not be ashamed of that. Let's be proud of that. Because we're getting to share in his suffering. Let us glorify him even more. For it is time for the judgment to begin at the household of God. What does that mean? For it is time for the judgment to begin at the household of God. There's two different judgments for Christians, I believe. I don't think it's a judgment of whether I'm going to go to heaven or I'm going to go to hell, but I think there's a judgment in this life called discipline. And if you are a meddler, you will be disciplined by God. If you have other things in your life, you will be disciplined by God in hopes to get you on the right path. So the judgment begins with us. Don't you remember the passage? I think it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. He says, I wrote to you before not to associate with the sexual immoral but by no means did I say the sexual immoral of the world, because then you would have to take yourself out of the world. I was referring to the inside. Because what do you have for judging the outside? Purge the evil among you. The judgment begins here. But we like to start it there and forget about us because we're covered. Judgment begins here. The other judgment is, of course, in the afterlife with our rewards. What rewards will we receive? Because I think each and every one of us will receive different rewards. I think Paul is going to receive far greater rewards than I could ever imagine, because he done far greater works than I could ever imagine. The judgment begins with us. Goes on, for it is time for the judgment to begin at the household of God. And if it begins with us, what will be the outcome of those who do not obey the gospel of God? And I think we know the answer to that question. It's not a good outcome. It's an eternity separated from love that Jeff's talked about in the communion meditation. Everything good, everything righteous is gone. Because God is love, and it will be an eternal separation from God. But it goes on and says, and this is a quote many thinks is from Proverbs 11:31, I think, but it says, if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinners? Now that's a tough passage, because we see that if the righteous is scarcely saved, then it makes us think that, we've got the belief system then that it's a possibility. Maybe I'll be saved, maybe I won't be saved. I'll just have to find out when I die and hope for the best. Is that what the passage is referring to? I don't think so. What scarcely means there, what it literally means is with difficulty. So if it's even difficult for the righteous to be saved, how much worse for them? So there's two different ways to look at this with difficulty. With difficulty could be referring to with great trials. I mean, Jesus said, if they persecute me, they will persecute you as well. So yes, it is going to be very difficult to be a Christian in this life. Even Jesus, when he converted Saul, turned into Paul, he told the man that was going to go heal him, I will show him, talking about Paul, I will show him just how much he will have to suffer for my name. So the with difficulties could be with all of the trials, all the suffering that we got to go through, Or it could be with, meaning with great trouble. If you remember the story of Lot, they was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. But Lot really still had trouble getting out of there. He still really kind of clung to it. We even see that the angels pretty much had to grab him and drag him out of the city. Some things that's what it means. That we're so stubborn, we're so bullheaded, even when they are trying to save our life and our soul, we still want to fight against it. So it's great difficulty for them. I think it refers more to the first one. Either one may hold water. Judgment begins with us. It says, therefore, verse 19, let those who suffer according to the will of God entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. We have a rough time sometimes seeing that suffer according to God's will, that He allows us to go through things. And we struggle with that in our mind. Why would us? Why would He? Why wouldn't He make it so much easier and just take all of the suffering away? But we see throughout Scriptures, and that's a sermon for another time, of how we are to rejoice more in it, and why are we to rejoice, and what it produces in us. And it makes us stronger. It makes us better witnesses, and an outside world sees that. Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator. We see that word entrust again back in chapter 2, verse 23, when talking about Jesus, it says, when He was reviled, He did not revile in return. When He suffered, He did not threaten, but continued entrusting Himself to Him who judges justly. When Jesus was being whipped on the cross, when He was being beaten, when He went through everything that He was going through, He didn't lash out. But rather, He continued to entrust Himself to the one who judges faithfully. In this passage, it says, to the faithful Creator. A couple of weeks ago, we had the sermon on Psalms 121, and verse 2, we see that faithful Creator. We see that Creator again, and we were reminded of Elohim, the strong Creator God. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. So while we go through suffering, we need to remember that we are to entrust our lives, entrust our souls to the Creator, the one who has strength, the one who has might, the one who can help us out of that pile and is a friend. Maybe you want Him as your friend. Maybe you want to entrust your soul and your life to that faithful, amazing, strong, great, indescribable Creator that we know as Yahweh. It's our personal God. If that's you, come now as we stand and sing.